That's true.
Which is fine, you know, because it's you know, it's great to be busy.
True. Yeah. We're starting to get a few people.
So hello, this is Alan. I got in by phone. I'm working to try to resolve the computer issue and get on video as soon as I can.
Okay.
Hey, Alan, was there a specific agenda for this meeting? Because I couldn't find it in my email.
Yes, there is. We sent it to you. Let me see. I don't know if I can get it to you by my phone. Muriel, if you're on, could you send the agenda to Mayor Walker, please?
Yes, I'll send that over to you right now, Mayor.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Steve, where do you office or remote call from?
Well, normally I'm in Laguna Beach, California. Today I'm up. We have a place up in the Sierra foothills outside of Yosemite, which is where we're at right now. Enjoying the smoke.
Oh, great.
Enjoying the smoke from all the fires.
Yeah. Are they starting to get those under control, or are they still raging?
No, I think so. I think it's you know, it's all about the weather. When they get these fires that are so monumental, it really becomes an issue of the weather, and there is a cooling trend has come in now, which will help a lot getting them under control. But some of them, you know, they're out in these areas. They just kind of let them go, you know, because they're so the circumference is so huge, and there's so many of them. There's not much they can do. Try and protect the population is about it. Seems to get worse every year.
Yeah, it does. Well, the whole West is just so parched right now.
Yeah. Either you get too much rain or not enough.
Morning, everybody.
Morning. Alan has had some technical problems this morning, so he's trying to get those sorted out.
Is everybody ready to start?
I think so,
Alan, you
Mayor.
there?
I think I just got on. It should be okay.
Okay.
Go,
All
Mayor.
right. Well, welcome everyone. It's good to see everyone, even though it's still on Zoom. Sounds like Steve's in the best location up in Yosemite. So you should do a background of something better than what you're doing, like El Capitan or something. But no, I appreciate everyone's time, and we'll get right to it because I know everyone's busy. I'm going to lead this meeting this time with respect to our agenda. It's pretty short. It is exciting to see the logo come up when we log in, the point logo. So that's awesome. Good work again. I just want to welcome everyone. I don't really have anything specific that I wanted to talk about other than I've had a couple of meetings with UTA and some of the MPOs, the metropolitan planning entities that Wasatch Front and MAG with respect to transportation. Alan and I have been in a couple of different meetings over the last few weeks where, and I guess if I could impress upon all of you members of our little infrastructure committee here, just whenever you're talking about the prison site and the development, continue to keep the need for transit and high quality connections as a priority so that everyone feels it, including our legislature and everyone else. We need to all be kind of preaching the gospel of that because the development of that site is really going to hinge on transit. And I think more uniquely than any other real estate development in Utah, this might be a time when we need the infrastructure to go in first, not after and as part of the development, but the transit infrastructure needs to be there really to make it happen. So if I could just impress on everyone to think about those concepts and whenever you're talking about your service on this committee or anything else, let's get that message out there so everyone knows about it. But other than that, I don't really have anything specific to add. I know we've got some interesting survey results to go over. But Alan, do you have anything else?
No, I think we're ready to start whenever you want us to.
Why don't we go ahead then and go ahead and do the July meeting recap?
All right. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your leadership here. And thanks to all of you for joining today. Great to see you, if only through another Zoom meeting. I want to mention a couple of things just in terms of kind of housekeeping. We are recording this meeting and it is being live streamed on our YouTube channel so that members of the public could watch if they wish, and they're certainly welcome to. But we wanted you to be aware of that. So today we're going to try to accomplish two things. First is to work with you to identify really the 2 or 3 most important concepts within your area of focus that can be included in a request for qualification that we're going to be sending out in a couple of weeks. So we'll be working with you based on poll results and further discussion today to narrow the focus to 2 or 3 areas for that purpose. That doesn't mean that everything else that we've shared is going to be ignored. Absolutely to the contrary. All of the ideas that we're generating will move forward, but for that first purpose, we're going to target just 2 or 3. Then the next thing that we'll accomplish today is setting up some smaller subgroups that can work over the next month or so to further refine those priority concepts. And we'll talk about what that looks like and what we need to have happen. But before we do that, we thought it'd be useful to take a look back at where we've been over the last month or so, make sure that everybody's on the same page. And then Steve Kellenberg, our planning coordinator, will spend a little time talking about the planning process going forward, how we're going to engage our planning team. And I'll talk a little bit more about the role of this group over the next few months so that you have kind of clear direction on what you're to accomplish. So first, looking back at our meeting in July, I thought we had a really good discussion and great participation. There were a number of concepts that came out of that, and emphasis on this site as a potential for high-tech development. A lot of discussion about transportation and creating a transportation system of the future that includes low-emission transportation, certainly transit, that we look at active transportation and really find ways that we're not relying just on the automobile. Talked about the fact that many in Draper and the surrounding region don't drive, and we need to have options for them. We discussed the Jordan River, its proximity to the site, and maintaining it as a resource and amenity. A lot of talk about transportation connectivity, some kind of a grid system through the site, connecting to the Bangerter Highway through the site to take some of the pressure off 146 South and some of the other Bluffdale roadways. There was good discussion about water quality, seeing if we can put in the right infrastructure to handle wastewater and stormwater runoff. And much of our transportation planning will have an impact on water quality. We talked about a carless, walkable, multi-use, transit-oriented development, a place that's active, robust, vibrant. There was, a lot of talk, and I think appropriately so, about coordinating with surrounding communities, making sure that we're aligning our infrastructure needs and development patterns so that they make sense regionally. So I think those were some of the major concepts that came out of that discussion. We kind of filtered in some of the input we received from the extensive public process that the Development Commission did in 2017, 2018, and tied some of those themes that you identified together. And that formed the basis for the input on that poll that we had you take. So we'll go over that later, but wanted you to be able to see that your input translated into the poll along with public input. And we'll use the polling results from this group as a starting point for our discussion. But I think the next step is then to go to Steve and have him kind of walk through the process we're going to go through over the next year. So maybe I'd turn it to Steve.
Well, it's saying that I can't share my screen for some reason. Let's try it again. There we go. So are you seeing a full screen?
Yes.
So what we've been doing is getting our arms around the process as we go forward. So we've done some scheduling. You can't read this, so I'm going to just jump down to a couple of the components. We are in the process of initiating an RFQ. We have already identified, so the first, for the rest of the year up through December, we'll be in the process of putting together a prime planning lead consultant as well as support consultants and putting together a full team. And this schedule is kind of giving an overview of that process. We already have a candidate list that we're in the final throes of defining. The RFQ will be open to the public. It will be posted. However, we are also targeting about 15 firms that we think are the best candidates to make sure that they are aware of the opportunity. And then we're going to this next month basically go through that RFQ process, and which will lead to a short list, and then we'll go in October more detailed RFP process with a short list of some number 5 or 6 or so, which will include interviews and also a little bit more of a challenge to respond to how they would approach some of our key vision topics. The big ideas that you all are developing and the other working groups will be a part of both the RFQ and the RFP, but with increasing level of response as we get into the RFP process. I wouldn't call it a design competition, but because we have a whole design process to deal with the design, but to at least find which firms have the most experience and the most sort of creativity in dealing with the key vision elements that you all have been working on identifying. Then as we get into next year, in January, we will go through the actual planning process with the goal of coming up with a framework plan by the end of June. And I think on our last call, I clarified the idea of the framework plan, versus a very detailed master plan, acknowledging that it's hard to predict, what some of the uses will be. And so what we're really trying to do is create a plan that has a strong armature that will stand the test of time and market trends, but allow flexibility as new companies and new components present themselves. This process, is pretty straightforward. It'll start with the site evaluation and opportunities and constraints, concurrent with some land use programming. You'll notice the contextual modeling stage is in here. That actually came from last team, which I thought was a really good one, and it's something we've done on other projects where we actually set up a GIS-based spatial analytics modeling platform, which will not only just deal with this site, but the jurisdictions and areas around it, so we can make sure that everything's touching and connecting in the right ways and is contributory and not in conflict. We'll develop some concept alternatives at a high level and then go into a framework plan refinement process with land use, urban design, transportation, open space, public realm, backbone infrastructure. Now, in both the concept stages and the framework plan refinement, we'll be touching back to the key vision elements and also have a financial and market optimization piece in there at some level that's reasonable for where we're at. So we make sure that we keep our eye on the ball in terms of both the market and financial feasibility. And then our final deliverable will be a not just a final report, but a guideline document. Think, if you're familiar with the Green Book that was developed at Stapleton, which just kind of became their mantra for 20 years in developing that project. It provides continuity as people come and go and companies come and go. And so our goal is to have something similar to that as an end product of this process. So that's kind of where we stand in terms of, and we're right on schedule, although the schedule's moving fast and we're realizing things are happening fast. As soon as next week, we'll actually be sending out the RFQ. So it'll, the train's leaving the station.
Any questions for Steve?
Any questions?
All right, then I'm gonna jump in and talk a little bit more specifically about your role and put that in context of what Steve described. So let me start with a little bit of fun music to wake everybody up. There you go. A little fun factor there.
Nice.
Some production value, right? That's what's good about having a good communications team. Thanks, Muriel. So I think the key message at this point is we've got a couple of things to do over the next few months, and we want to make sure that you understand those processes and have a chance to weigh in a little bit. So as Steve said, we want to issue an RFQ in a couple of weeks after our board gets a chance to review it and approve it. Part of that RFQ will include kind of our vision statements, the concepts that we think are the pillars of what we want to accomplish here. Now, in an RFQ, we don't go into a lot of detail. We're just looking for those firms that have the background, skills, qualifications to accomplish what we have in mind. And so we're not going to be able to include every idea that comes out of each of our 5 working groups. And instead, we're going to probably have 5 or 6 collectively that we'll put in that RFQ. As I said before, that doesn't mean that all the other ideas are lost by any means, because we'll continue to move those forward, develop them, and use them in our work with the ultimately successful planning team. So at this point, we're going to work with you today, work through the poll that you did as a starting point. Then in September, over the coming month or so, we'll ask you to take the top 2 or 3 ideas and concepts that you develop and self-select into smaller subgroups that can just meet a time or two, put some meat on the bones. Essentially say, okay, if we're talking about mixed-use center, what does that mean? What are the components of that? What are the key elements of that that would make it successful? What are some of the key alliances we need to build? What are some of the next steps we need to take? So we'd ask you to help us through September to kind of work on that, and then on the September meeting, share your thoughts and ideas. We'd continue that refinement process in October. And starting with the end in mind, by the end of this calendar year, we would like to have a little report that we've put together that we can hand over to our lead planning team that will provide input into their work on this framework master plan that Steve talked about. So we're not going to ask you to come in the week of Thanksgiving, and we're not going to ask you to meet during the busy holiday season at the end of December. So that'll be kind of a work period, and we'll be doing most of the work, but may have you weigh in, if you will, on some drafts that we put together. So the real substantive work is going to take place over the next couple of months. So any questions on that, or any suggestions on that process, how we can improve it? Okay, then I say everybody roll up your sleeves and let's get busy and see if we can accomplish our work for the day. And Muriel, do you have the results of, actually I've probably got it too. Let me pull up the poll.
Absolutely. I put the top 3 results that you had as your stated priorities in the chat feature, just so you guys had the top 1, 2, and 3. And then let me know if you can all see this. This shows the chart of the results.
Okay, so thank you very much to all of you for taking that poll and providing your initial input. All right, let me emphasize that you are not tied to those specific categories. Those are the ones that we came up with based on your initial conversations with us. But today, your task is to identify 2, maybe 3 top concepts that you think ought to be included in the RFQ. So if we look at the results, and just as a starting point, we've got most support for this concept of emphasizing placemaking, and specifically says emphasize placemaking, creating a vibrant, walkable place that includes housing, jobs, shops, and other amenities. So mixed-use centers can serve as a model for other developments. Next was focusing on the transportation system. That's the orange bar down there. That's kind of a transportation of the system of the future, high quality transit, autonomous vehicles, aerial modes, EVs, charging system, walkability, street connectivity, active transportation, etc. Kind of the third was coordinating infrastructure with the surrounding jurisdictions and also protecting gateways into the site. That goes back to that fundamental principle of coordination with our neighbors and making sure we're good neighbors and we do something good for the region. The yellow bar next, and that's strategically, you can see this, planning the balance of jobs and workforce housing, meet the needs of a range of income levels. So those were kind of the main ones. If we go down from there, you see things like building flexibility so that we can accommodate new technologies and changes in the market, ensuring that the Jordan River stays, beautiful and is an amenity to the area. We've got scaling the point consistently with the broader region, implementing wastewater reuse, low impact development strategies, developing the site to be carbon neutral, and of course considering the impacts of COVID-19, whether that means we have to develop a little differently in the future than we have now. So that's kind of where you were individually as you responded to this poll. I think what we'd like to do now is kind of open it up to a broader discussion and see if there are these 2 or 3 broad categories that you'd like to have included in the RFQ. So you can either just say that the poll results reflect where we are and top 2 or 3 are where we want to be, or you can look at ways of combining them, restating them, but that's our job now. So I guess I'd turn it over to you as a working group for any thoughts.
Alan, this is Andrew. I have a question which is not going to be directly responsive to the task you've laid in front of us, but I think it relates. How do you envision determining, or are we intentionally planning for the question of how much of the activity at the site stays within the site, and how much is it people coming in and out of the site for various purposes? So, I mean, we've talked about this before, that the notion that if we can have a site that has a mix of uses, that the sort of internal capture rate of people working and kids going to school and shopping, et cetera, a lot of that can happen within the point area. And we've also talked about it being a regional destination for jobs, et cetera. And do we have as a group or you as an organization have kind of a target on what we're trying to accomplish in that space? Because I think that has a lot of impact then on a lot of the other areas that we're being asked to look at and prioritize.
Yep, that's exactly what we're talking about with the working groups, to identify what the scope and scale of the planning effort ought to be. And as we've said all along, we can't look at this site in isolation. Certainly we'll be having sort of this conceptual framework plan that'll look at uses on the site, but it's got to be tied in with the broader region. And so as we do our economic and market analysis, we're looking broadly at the region. As we look at transportation, we're going to have to look broadly at the regional transportation system and how this fits in and makes it work broadly. As we think about jobs and housing, we're going to have to look at what's going on in the broader region. So the answer is both. Yeah, we'll look within the site, but also how it fits in more broadly. And so the task today, and we're seeking input from you on exactly those ideas. And you saw that one of the poll questions was coordinating with surrounding jurisdictions, because we recognize that as being a priority.
There is a methodology that we've used on some projects in the past that I found very interesting. And it was developed by Farron Pierce, Jerry Walters, who was one of their research developers. And we called it the golden mean. And the golden mean was a very interesting process where you basically took a site like this and you drew a perimeter around it, a certain distance around it, and it incorporating surrounding jurisdictions and areas. And then you backed into an analysis to identify what is the optimal mix of jobs, housing, and retail. Basically, those three uses. You keep it simple: jobs, housing, and retail. And what is the perfect mix within that larger study area to maximize internal trip capture? And then that informs the land use program for the particular project on how to achieve that perfect sort of golden mean of land use mix. And it ends up being different for different sites, because if you're in an area that's primarily housing around the site, you would have more jobs. If you're at a site that was primarily more job intensive, you'd have more housing, and so forth. But that might be an approach that we want to consider as we get into this, to find at least be one input into the land use mix that would sort of optimize the transportation dimension.
Alan, can I jump in here?
Please.
So it relates to this conversation about land use mix, and the land use mix including the context around the prison site. And it also relates to, I think it's the number 2 priority from the poll, which is, or 2 or 3, which is about the transportation connections in and out of the prison site. And my suggestion is that we broaden that notion of coordinating transportation in and around the site to also open space, certainly part of a framework plan, but possibly also land use concepts. In other words, that it's a broader set of coordination, not just transportation around the site. And that perhaps we aim to have that be part of the deliverable of the framework plan. And I think that affects this question of land use mix as well. I mean, we could say, well, what's the golden mean, let's say, for under the current general plan or current zoning for the surrounding communities? Or we could say, well, how might those play into optimizing the land use mix as well? Maybe we don't take that as a given, but we play with that as part of a framework plan itself.
Thank you.
Maybe just to stay with WFRC to close this loop right here, and then Ted and I'll stop talking. I don't promise that, but I think that this point, golden mean or internal capture or whatever, suggests that the poll, Alan, to your question, putting placemaking and a mix of housing, jobs, shops, etc., a mixed use center, is the right number 1. Because if we do have that mix in that center, then that enables more internal capture, which, you know, has bearing on transportation and a whole variety of other things. And Stephen, I don't know how if we quantify that in some way with the golden mean or otherwise, but it just generally feels to me that our number 1, and I'll just say number 2, are in the right order, in my view at this point.
I'd like to add that I think, along with looking at that golden mean, the surrounding area, also looking ahead as how can this project transform the entire area, the surrounding cities. I mean, not only being compatible from the beginning, but also looking 10, 20 years down the road, how this is going to transform that whole area and become a statewide regional project to look to as an example, just like Daybreak and Sadie Creek and some of those projects.
This is Grant in Bluffdale. We're going to have our general plan open about the same time next year as this work is being done. And so that land use relationship that Ted spoke about, kind of broadening that and just having that discussion, I think is really important for us, whichever one informs each other. I think the prison site will be the big one, but there's a lot of real estate people kind of speculating over on the Bluffdale side, and asking us a lot of questions. So I think that would be important in addition to the infrastructure.
Good point.
I've got a quick question. What's the community sentiment right now about mixed use and more intensive development? Because I know there has been a lot of pushback in many communities across the region towards mixed use and more intensive development. I'm thinking of Holiday and Draper and Harriman and Saratoga Springs and other places in the vicinity of this area.
Yeah, it's a good question, Soren. It's one that's been on our minds a little bit. I think we have seen some concerns with more intense development in some areas that have primarily been residential in the past. I think this one might be a little different in that it's in an area that isn't now residential. It's right by the transportation system, so you're not going to be creating a lot of traffic going through existing neighborhoods. And we have gone through this public process, again, involving more than 4,000 people. And these were the concepts that rose to the surface in that effort. I think we can all confidently say that there will be some pushback and that there will be those that aren't happy with whatever goes in there. But we're actually doing, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, we're doing some public input opportunities where the public will be able to weigh in on concepts and ideas. And so we'll be continually reaching out and trying to understand what the public temperature is. Muriel's putting up a visual here that I think is really interesting, that represents some polling that was done in Draper. Muriel, do you want to talk through that?
Sure, and Mayor Walker and Christina Oliver, Draper City's community development director, are on the call. So you guys could probably speak to this better than I, but the city conducted a general residence survey July of 2019 and asked residents about sentiments on growth and development. It did rise to the level of, being a top concern or priority for residents, but when asked, keep in mind separately and independently to indicate on a map where they would like to see future development. And this was a scientifically fielded randomized survey, representative of the Draper City demographics. You'll see very clear on this heat map that residents by and large indicated the prison site as a prime development opportunity.
Yeah, so obviously that's just Draper residents, and Grant, maybe Bluffdale and some of the others would be different, but I think that gives us a little sense for where the public is.
I mean, this is Grant. This was even talked about last night at our city council meeting. We have a pretty dense for Bluffdale project south of here, Independence at the Point. It can have 3,500 residents. It was supposed to be mixed use, as many projects are, and for whatever reasons, the commercial hasn't come. So the council is kind of concerned that, all these ideas of the density, people promise certain things that come with it, whether it's, a sandwich shop, a Walmart, or a bus, and those things haven't materialized yet. So, for us, if someone were coming in and wanting 1,000 more units, we'd have some concerns. Also with these kind of opportunity costs, if we have land use along Porter Rockwell and the bridge over the river isn't done till 2022, and they turn these land uses into, density or even light industrial or something, is that an opportunity cost that waiting a couple of years and seeing what the impact of the Porter Rockwell connections and the prison site would have yielded maybe a higher and best use? So there's a lot of things like that. And of course, there's just some typical concerns that the residents have, as about things that are different, but that's kind of the stuff we're hearing right now.
Thanks for that.
Maybe just jump in and talk about that as we engage the public. You'll be very similar to Sidla in the sense that you are a state entity that owns this property. And if you structure your deals appropriately, you can give your development partners the patience to wait for these things to come. I noticed Grant kept saying none of these things have come yet. And you will have the advantage of being a patient landowner because you are a state entity. And if you structure it right so the carrying costs are minimal for your partners, you allow that patience, and that's a good arrow to have in your quiver as you talk to the public, that these things are more likely to happen here than they are in a private developer who has interest clock ticking on things that you could certainly structure differently. And that's been a big help to us as we've faced a lot of these issues.
Yeah,
I wanted to chime in. I think it's important to remember a couple of things. And, the point of the Mountain Commission, which was the predecessor in a law, by and large to the Prison Land Development Authority, that commission, which I sat on and a few of you on here have been on as well, that we did extensive public outreach. And so the concept of this being, to go to Soren's point, what is the public expecting? It's clear that this, the public picked in the point of the Mountain Commission's work, the public picked the most dense use. Now, of course, it may not be the same public, as you know, but we have to go on what work was done, and so the concept that it'll be the most intense of the uses was clearly picked by the focus groups, and there were thousands of people that were involved in it. And I just want to keep the focus going forward. We know the prison site is going to be something of an intense use. I mean, certainly the impetus to move it, if you look at the state's analysis for doing it, it's all pretty clear. And I just want to keep us focused on, we're not looking for input about whether people want density, because it's coming there. And if you don't know it's coming there, then you're just not really paying attention, because it is. And I think it's been clear all along that that's why we moved it, and what we're going to do there is going to be unique and intense. But I want to keep us focused. We've done an extensive amount of work in public input. And so I don't want to go down the road of a whole bunch more public input on what they want to go there, because the public, it's obvious what's going to go there. And I think being a state entity, we need to develop it, in the state's best interest. So keeping that in mind.
So kind of refocusing us, I guess, on the task at hand. What are a couple things that ought to be in that RFQ? We've seen the poll results. You have other ideas about what ought to be included, whether on the poll or not, ways of combining some of those concepts. But ultimately, again, we're looking for those key concepts that we would ask a respondent to an RFQ to respond to in terms of their abilities, background, skill set to accomplish that goal.
Alan, this is Will Marcorn. I think an important part, the poll really reflects it, and it's one of the top 3 priorities. But I think I really kind of am in agreement with Alex Marshall, who's been a long time commentator on metropolitan and transportation design and layout, and he indicates he says that the skeleton that lays out your metropolitan area or your urban area, and then the meat on the bones really hangs on that skeleton and determines what it's going to be like. So I really think focusing early on what the transportation system for the site and the connections to transportation around the site and the region are really a key thing to focus on early on in the process.
Yeah, thanks, Will.
Thinking aloud a bit, hitting the process point, there It's not entirely clear to me how the public will be engaged or stakeholders, but we know they have to be engaged. If you're looking for qualifications from a team, you may want to put that right in the RFQ and highlight it. Help us understand your ability to work through these kinds of projects that are really high profile. Does your team have those kinds of qualifications?
Well, Alan, what do you, have we got, are we accomplishing your desire here for what we want in the RFP?
Yeah, I think part of it may be that we've got some agreement. We saw what was in the poll, as Andrew said earlier. It looks like those first couple, the placemaking piece, the transportation system piece, seem to be kind of priorities. Ted mentioned including some experience and ability with public process. I guess the question maybe to move this ahead is, if we look at placemaking and transportation, and we can work on the language a little bit, as kind of the two key links going forward, is there anything else that you'd like to include? We got Ted's good suggestion. Or is there some consensus that those are the priorities?
What about the financial component? Is that a top 3 or a top 5 in terms of paying for itself, providing economic engine to the state and the region? I'm posing a question more than a proposal of an idea.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, and that is a priority. I mean, that if you look at the analysis from the state's perspective for the move and the new prison, yes, that's got to be part of it, a major part of it. I agree with that 100%.
That is an important piece, and we do have RCLCO working on that piece. They'll be working very closely with the planning team, and so I think together they'll be trying to figure out what's the program, the land use program, that allows us to accomplish those economic financial goals. It's a good point.
One of the things I'd like to try and narrow down in the RFQ, I don't know how to say it, but with respect to the transportation piece, since it's the number 2 thing in the survey, the RFQ dealing with outside the box transportation concepts, not just the standard stuff that we've been doing in Utah, but a way to look at unique stuff like, what they're doing in Vegas with respect to the tunnel, Musk's building, some of that kind of stuff, outside the box concepts that might be deployed here that would make it a unique place and make it even more efficient. Instead of bridging the freeway, to get to the tracks lines, maybe we tunnel to them. I think that might be important to have an outside the box transportation thinker that would tie into what was just said about financing, funding it, and are there better ways to fund it? If we're going to go with the old model, we're in trouble. The concept of how we're going to fund the transportation has got to be outside the box too.
Yeah, Alan, one thing that's going through my mind, this is Sean with Mountain Land, is some of the bigger transportation projects right now that UDOT has been managing. They've taken a really unique approach to building these based on a design build approach, where they give the contractor broad discretion in how they get the work done with very specific performance targets. And as long as the contractor gets the work done, then they achieves the ultimate design. UDOT doesn't micromanage how they go about doing that. Kind of a performance-based approach. I'm wondering if you or the team has considered any type of a design build approach on some of the property at this site. What I hear Grant saying is sometimes we get the public coming up and saying, hey, we don't want this density, or the commercial's not selling, or whatever it might be, where if you could take a piece of this and you have that kind of some of the broad design of this already done by Envision Utah, the center concept with other elements to it. You may want to consider that kind of an idea of taking some of that property, giving it to a design build group, and seeing what they can do in terms of what the market would support, what the market is selling at this point, and then reserve some of the other property through time as the market continues to evolve and change, rather than being prescriptive about exactly what they need to build. This area right here only is 1/4 acre. This area is 8 units per acre. This area must be multi-use or multi-family. So anyway, I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sean. And actually, I think that's more aligned with where we're going than trying to come up here with a site plan. Because we know things are going to change over time with the market, with technologies, et cetera. So I think we don't, especially in the RFQ and even in the RFP, we don't want to be prescribing the details of what the planning firm or ultimately the development team does. We want to give them some flexibility to be creative within principles that we outline. So a lot of what we're trying to do now is really identify what are those principles that are going to be guiding the planning team and ultimately the development team.
This is Grant Farnsworth with UDOT, and I don't speak for UDOT. This is just my personal opinion, but it seems like a lot of these also kind of go back to maximizing infrastructure investments that we'll be making with transit or have made with roadway, where internal capture really does maximize infrastructure and TOD developments around transit. And these even land uses that can have different peak periods can offset and maximize what you can get through on your infrastructure. And so I would just maybe, that's maybe not a overall theme, but maybe a sub principle, guiding principle that we could be employing. And where we do have SPUIs in other locations, these interchanges, single point urban interchanges, they can be kind of bottleneck or strangled by their adjacent intersections. And so we want to make sure that we develop in a way that we don't actually are for too close to those large infrastructure improvements with something under capacity, then it can actually end up strangling the overall capacity of these large scale improvements. So just something to consider.
Yeah, really good thoughts, Grant. Thank you.
Alan, I've got a thought, just kind of scanning through the survey results and looking at these top 3 that Muriel put in the chat window. I'm wondering if that 3rd point could maybe be expanded to deal with different kinds of infrastructure, because there actually were several responses around the river and green space and water treatment and things like that, that in some ways are part of infrastructure. If we think broadly about infrastructure being utilities, but also potentially being green infrastructure, stormwater, wastewater, green space, and those sorts of things. I wonder if we couldn't expand that one a little bit to try and capture multiple elements and talk about green infrastructure to include innovative wastewater and green infrastructure and parks and open space and other things kind of encompassed within a single descriptor. If the idea is to try and keep it to maybe 3 or so, I think some of those other elements could be pulled into a little bit broader definition that encompasses many different ideas.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, and certainly something that you can do.
One more, well, I got 2 reactions to one thing that Jake said before, and then one thing that Mayor Walker said. Just to drill down a little more on Jake's point about funding and financing alternatives. Alan, you said RCLCO is doing land use analysis that will relate to financial, but is there an intention that the RFP is going to have an ask for expertise in the team to do really sophisticated funding options and financial analysis? Or is that meant to be relied on by RCLCO or somebody else?
No, I think there's some flexibility there, but RCLCO has the ability to do that. And so the plan is that they'll be working with the planning team on the financial side. And that would include the structure of our organization, how we pay for the infrastructure, how we pay for the development, et cetera. Yeah.
Okay. And then perhaps this is obvious, but the work that's happening right now that UTA is coordinating for the what we used to call alternatives analysis for transit to the site, as I think most of you know, there's a funding and financing aspect to that work as well. So we'd want to have good coordination. And I'm just sort of presuming that there's going to be good coordination among the teams that are working on the various aspects of this. I want to just give a quick reaction to what Mayor Walker said about looking for innovative solutions. And I say, absolutely, we should be open to looking at innovative solutions to a point. And that is that if we were to, I think there's a degree of risk that if we made a big point of emphasis in the RFP that we're looking for innovative solutions, we have the possibility that we sort of send the work off in a direction that could be a wild goose chase. And, you know, I think we have done a great amount of work collectively on transportation, tying in with the existing system. And if there's innovation that can be brought to this, that's great. But you could have, you know, global transportation entities that are looking at this as as a canvas on which to do unique and innovative transportation approaches. And that could be, it could take a bunch of time and it could lead in some other directions that might function as a distraction. So I guess my point is, I think let's just be careful about how we describe what we're looking for there.
That's a wise caution. Yep, understand.
Yeah, maybe taking Andrew's thought one step further. There are sound solutions that have been tested for, you know, generations around urban development, even fairly dense urban development, that are not necessarily innovative. They're often very practical and intuitive, but they are time tested. And I think that's maybe, Andrew, one of the things that you're trying to get at is we don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel, because there are, both in Utah and around the West and around the globe, really successful examples of placemaking that are not innovative in that they've been around sometimes for hundreds of years. They're very adaptive, I guess, is part of what I'm thinking about. Things like intersection density and grids, whether they're regular grids like Brigham Young and other American planners proposed, or they're organic grids that you see in Europe and Asia that function every bit as well as the cardinal coordinate grids that we're much more used to in the US.
Great. Well, then maybe I don't want to cut off discussion prematurely, but I think what I'm hearing is that we've got, you know, those three concepts that Muriel put in the chat room. They were the top three ideas that came out of the polling. And I'm hearing general support for advancing those as candidates to include in the RFQ. As I said before, if it's not in the RFQ, it doesn't mean we're done by any means, because we'll continue to refine and develop these ideas further, including in the next few weeks. But So we could have one as the placemaking piece, walkable, jobs, housing balance, open space, etc. 2, the transportation system, looking at innovative approaches, but ensuring that it's closely coordinated with existing plans for the region, and we're not building Disneyland here in isolation. And then 3rd, in terms of coordinating the infrastructure with surrounding jurisdictions, that would be everything from wastewater, stormwater, natural areas, electric, etc. Are we comfortable with those if we kind of tweak the language a little bit to fit into an RFQ context, but use that substance as kind of the basis for moving ahead? Anyone object to that? Okay. We'll go ahead with those then as this group's priorities, and thank you. I mean, really good input. So I think maybe the more important and more interesting discussion is the one that we kind of want to head into next, and one that you've already started. It's one thing to identify general concepts to include in an RFQ. It's another to come up with what that really means and what message we're trying to convey to the planning team. So we want to, with your permission, set up 3 subgroups, one for each of those areas, the placemaking, the transportation, and the infrastructure coordination, and have you over the next few weeks get together in those subgroups and, let's say, put the meat on the bones. So if we say we want to emphasize placemaking, what does that mean? What are the elements of that? What are the key components of the kind of place that we want to develop? We've talked about, retail, jobs, housing, and balance, etc. You may want to wrestle with that a little bit more. We talked about the infrastructure piece. So what does that mean? What are the elements of infrastructure that ought to be included? Who do we need to be partnering with? What are key next steps to get where we want to be? So we're going from bigger picture now to start working with you on the fun stuff, getting a little bit more into detail on what it is we want to see at this site and why. So Muriel is going to, in a minute, put up a matrix that has your names on it, along with these 3 broader categories, and would ask you, if you're willing, to identify which of the groups you would most like to serve on. Maybe a number 1 for your top priority, a number 2 for your second priority, and number 3 for your third priority. We'll then kind of go through this list in the next day or so, try to identify who would serve on each of these groups. I've identified somebody to sort of take the lead in coordinating the first meeting, and I'd send out an email that would have a little more detail on what we're asking for, some questions that you might answer. We're not asking for a detailed report. We're asking for maybe a page, 2 at the most, of bullet points that would kind of outline the key elements, what this concept means in a little more detail, how you would define placemaking, etc. Maybe a few ideas on key allies that we ought to be working with. And that can either be, specific groups like the MPOs, or it can be categories. We need to be working more with the development community, or whatever it might be. And then a couple of key next steps. I don't want to twist anybody's arm too hard. So I know that you're all busy and may not be able to take a couple of hours in the next month for a meeting to discuss this, but your help would be really valuable. So give you a moment to look at the list, identify your preferences, and then we'll follow up in the next few days with an email helping to organize these groups.
Alan, sorry, just to clarify on the relationship between group 2 and group 3, if group 2 is transportation and group 3 is infrastructure coordination, is the way that we should think about this right now that group 3 is not thinking about transportation?
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to look at it. Just
Okay.
so we don't have too much overlap. Yeah, think about group three as maybe non-transportation infrastructure. Although we know there will be some overlap. You know, probably want to, if we're talking about stormwater infrastructure, obviously the transportation system has a lot to do with that. But in terms of just broad categories, let's think of it as non-transportation infrastructure.
You know, I think there's going to be a certain amount of overlap and messiness because you can't really isolate any of these from any of the others. I mean, placemaking is entirely about transportation and the public realm and what those systems look like. But yeah, I think if the intent is you know, kind of what's captured in the title.
Yeah, we absolutely understand there's going to be overlap, and I don't mind a little messiness, and I don't mind some overlap. I mean, we're going to be coming back together in the next meeting, have the subgroups kind of just share their thoughts, have broader discussion among the group, and see if we can reconcile the areas of overlap or any conflict. All right, so we can, you know, go ahead and if you want to fill that out as we're talking, you know, again, we'll follow up with an email and give others an opportunity to join, and just want to give you, as we said, every opportunity to weigh in and kind of get into the more fun details here. So, any other questions on that? All right, well, Mayor Walker, then I think we can turn it back to you to get to the next item or the last item on our agenda.
Well, if that's the wrap up, well, we wanted Muriel to go over the public rollout, right?
That's right.
Muriel, take it away. Give us your public rollout plans.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks, Mayor. I only need just a few minutes. We've been having some technical difficulties on showing our point video, which we professionally produced via Google Meets, because there's been an update in the Google Meet software that makes it a little tricky. So with that caveat, I'm going to try a different approach with you guys today. Stop me if you can't hear this audio. Actually, wait a minute. Let me try one more thing. Okay, here we go.
Most people in the state know that the existing correctional facility at the point of the mountain is going to be moved, which means that this land is going to be available for development. That area will be known as the Point.
The new prison is expected to be completed in mid-2022. At that point, we'll start looking at demolition of the site and site preparation for development.
There's really not much like this anywhere in the world, where you have 700 acres located in a densely populated area in the heart of Silicon Slopes. This is unlike anything we've seen in the history of the state of Utah, and a rare opportunity in the United States or anywhere in the world.
We have one of the most vibrant technology scenes in the country, maybe even the world. The epicenter of Utah's Silicon Slopes is really at that prison site. And so we'll have the opportunity to have this blank slate that can be programmed to help accelerate additional growth, additional opportunity, so that we can see a major campus form there, a campus that's environmentally sustainable, that is focused and centered around research and innovation, that is a job center, that allows people who live and work in the site to access the beautiful outdoors that we have here in the state of Utah.
Our approach has been to think big. The point will be impressive. This will be a unique place for innovation, for technology, for research and vibrant growth with an eye towards quality of life, transportation, air quality.
This will be a place that is not just about corporations or buildings, it's about community, it's about people. There will be some residential and commercial. Certainly, we think it's important to have recreation and open space.
We want to make sure that future generations look back on what we did here and they can be proud of those decisions, making sure that it doesn't impact traffic negatively, that it doesn't impact air quality negatively, that this can actually be a model for future development so that we can add people without lowering the quality of life and diminishing what makes the state the best place to live, work, and play.
The reality is that we're not going to be able to stop growth, but we can grow in ways that preserve what we value most. That's our commitment at this site.
The people of Utah want this to be a very sustainable development that draws on the best technology. It could be a showcase piece for our entire country. It will create new educational opportunities, new employment opportunities, and it will only enhance the quality of life here.
We don't have a plan for this site yet. We want it to be open to the public so they can see what we're doing and have input into the process. Tell us what works, what doesn't, how we can improve it.
The dream is that this will be something that is unique and something that every Utahn can be proud of.
We would rather be right than fast on this project. The citizens are part of this decision-making process. It's not just the governor or the legislature. It really is everyone working together to make this the best project it can possibly be, to show the world that that entrepreneurial spirit of Utah people coming together still exists, and it's something we're very proud of and can't wait to complete.
Muriel, you're on mute. We had to mute you because we were getting feedback.
Oh, could you hear the video? You could hear the video. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotta love these virtual meetings. So, yeah, I'm not sure if you guys heard the delay or not, but if you want to see the full video, it is on our website's homepage and also on our YouTube channel. So I wanted to just briefly show our website. It is now live, and I'll be talking a little bit more about an upcoming press conference and our public rollout. So homepage, we have an about section with a little more history about ourselves, the staff and the board. Public meetings, as Alan mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, all of these meetings are publicly available, board meetings and the working group meetings. So I wanted to make sure that you all had a chance to take a look at your tab here on our website, and go to this after our meeting if you don't mind. Make sure that your headshot and your bio is what you want it to be. So if you hover over your headshot, we'll take Mayor Walker here.
We're not able to see the website. Can you share that presentation so that we can see that?
Yeah, here we go. So right here under Public Meetings tab, Working Groups and Infrastructure, that is the page specific to your group. And please take a look at this after the meeting to make sure that you're comfortable with how you are represented here on our site. Your headshot, your bio, if you hover over your picture, it's just a 1-paragraph bio. Meeting materials, we will be posting agenda materials, the recording of the meeting, as well as our meeting notes on our website as well. We have a news section, a resources section. I want to just call this out since a lot of you all work on the resources that we link to on the website, including, for example, the area plans and visioning. So we've got the Point of the Mountain vision, the Wasatch Choice 2050 vision, Valley Visioning, which was conducted in Utah County, and of course, UVision, Utah's transportation vision. Area projects that are currently underway that relate to what we're doing on the site, Utah's Unified Transportation Plan and area general plans from the surrounding communities, things like that. So we at least link to these resources on our website because we feel like it's very pertinent to the work at the site. Also just wanted to point out, because a lot of you work directly with the public in your various capacities, so we do have a contact page for the public to get in touch with us. We want their point of view. Our team had a lot of fun coming up with all different kinds of phrases we could use that is a play on the word, the point. We have a physical address, an email address, phone number. If someone calls that, it goes directly to my cell, so they get a real person on the other line answering that call. We have social media accounts set up, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. LinkedIn we won't use as readily right out of the gate, but at least we have that secured. And then, like I mentioned, our YouTube channel. The uniform social media handle we have for all of this is @ThePointUtah. People can provide their information here, send us a comment or a question, as well as sign up for our email newsletter. So again, all these resources are publicly available on the contact page of our website. So feel free to direct people there if you get questions about how they can get in touch with us. So you all should have received a save the date for our scheduled press conference on Monday, September 14th at 9 o'clock at the correctional facility site. As our working group members, we have to have you there. In the age of COVID, of course, we're providing a virtual participation option for those who don't feel comfortable or aren't available to attend in person. So if you want to watch it live streamed on our YouTube channel, you can do that as well. More details about the exact, part of the site that will be set up for that will be forthcoming. So, part of our announcement, as we do kind of a public rollout here, is we just hired Steve as our world-renowned planning coordinator. I mean, his credentials really speak for themselves, and you've gotten to see that, in the discussions here in these working group meetings. So we're excited to announce that hire, and we will also have a publicly available statewide survey that we will be announcing as available. Quick 5-minute survey. The questions we're asking the public to weigh in on are building on what we heard from them during the visioning process. So not duplicative, but also not starting from scratch. We will be really trying to meaningfully gather some input from the public as we move along with our processes, transitioning from visioning now to planning. So we'll announce that as well, and you'll see just a lot about us in the news as we make the rounds with the various editorial boards and the print outlets and the TV stations as well. So happy to answer any questions you have. That's kind of just the next steps over the next few weeks. And we hope to have a steady drumbeat of developments in the news as we move along in the process.
All right, that must be my cue. Thank you, Muriel, for that. I have to say it's exciting to see how quickly we're really starting to move with this project, and it's really looking awesome. So thank you for all your hard work. The logo looks great. The video's good. I mean, that's as good of a video introduce it as I think I've seen. So I think it's awesome. So great work. That takes us to the wrap up, which I have none. Does anybody want to wrap anything up, or are we all ready for the adjournment of this meeting?
Let me just say thanks again to everybody. I love this team. You've done so much for our community over the years and continue to, and appreciate your willingness to share your expertise with us. Thanks.
All right. Well, with that, thank you all for your help and willingness to contribute and getting to be a part of what will be probably one of the greatest development projects in our lifetime. So thank you all again, and let us know which of the subcommittees you want to be a part of, and then we'll go from there. I guess you'll reach out next once we have the list and let everyone know.
I will. I'll let you know which subgroup you're on, who's going to kind of coordinate it, and a little more detail on what we hope you can accomplish.
All right. All right. And I wanted to throw it out there. If anyone's interested that's a mountain biker, I'm setting up a little Thursday morning group where we can all get up and ride up in Corner Canyon. We have a brand new trail that puts you right up on top of the Widowmaker. So you'll be able to see the prison site from there and see the value of the open space that Draper and Lehigh have contributed into this, what'll add to this site. But if you're interested, just send me an email or a text, and my assistant Kelly's we're gonna try and get a regular Thursday morning mountain bike group. I would love to take all of you up and show you what we have. Thank you.
Sounds awesome, Mayor. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.